evening, everyone, and welcome to Black Literature, Black History. Tonight we're going to be covering the Camp Hill shootings in 1931 that Langston Hughes mentioned in his story, Father and Son and the Ways of White Folks. So tonight we're going to cover the Camp Hill shootings. Tomorrow I'm going to make some videos about Father and Son and the Ways of White Folks as a whole. Then we're going to close out the Ways of White Folks and move into the Big C, which is the first autobiography of Langston Hughes. Now, research on the Camp Hill shootings was kind of difficult because I couldn't find many peer-reviewed articles and straight-up factual articles that focus primarily on the Camp Hill shootings itself. The Camp Hill shootings was an event that happened while organizers and the International Labor Defense, which was the communist organization that helped defend the Scottsboro Boys case, organizing black sharecroppers in Alabama. Some of the backgrounds: the black communists and Russian communists together had a successful organization or union created in England, Arkansas, and when news of this successful organization and union reached the sharecroppers in Alabama, they wanted to form a union and receive some of the benefits that workers in Arkansas had received. Because in Alabama in 1931, the black sharecroppers working on plantations were essentially reduced to slaves. Like, they cut deals with plantation owners and landlords, and after they did the work and sold their cotton and paid their expenses, they were left with nothing. So they were essentially like slaves. They work all day and don't get anything in return. So the International Labor Defense, which is a communist organization from Russia, came to their defense and wanted to organize the black workers into a union to receive some sort of benefit for their work. Now, I'm going to read an excerpt from some of the research that I did, which ties together the Camp Hill shootings, which occurred in 1931, with the Scottsboro Boys case. The sheriff and his deputies broke up a meeting in a country church 6 miles from Camp Hill on the night of July 16th. The next night, a meeting was held to protest the Scottsboro convictions, and the sheriff returned with 2 deputies to stop it. Near the church, the sheriff's car encountered a Negro armed with a shotgun. According to the story of the Camp Hill chief of police, his story, the sheriff descended and ordered the Negro to throw up his hands, give up his gun, and disclose the content of a bundle he was carrying under his arm. For reply, the sheriff received a charge of birdshot in the side. The sheriff and the 2 deputies opened fire upon the Negro, who then fired upon the car, slightly wounding one of the deputies. Thereupon, the Negro collapsed in the road, and the sheriff was helped into the car, which proceeded back to Camp Hill, miraculously indeed, if the chief of police is to be credited. Less than 30 seconds after the gun battle, hell broke loose. Through the cornfield, in the woods, surrounding the field and the Negro meeting place. The entire country was a blaze of fire, and it sounded like no man's land of more than a decade ago. So, this is what happened during the Camp Hill shootings. Now, this article said that they were meeting to protest the Scottsboro convictions. Other articles said that they were holding regular union meetings, and the white people didn't want them to hold any more meetings, seized literature that was calling for social equity. And anything calling for social equity was frowned upon by white folks because they didn't want black people to have any sort of equity. And they needed a reason. All they needed was a reason to just start killing black folks, because that's what they jumped to. They never sought to organize or discuss conditions. Whenever black people stood up for themselves, the initial reaction of white folks was, who can we kill to put this stuff down? So all they looked for was reason. So they sent this police officer there. He gave his account, which they always say, we said this, we ordered that. They refused, they resisted, so we had to take drastic action. And then there was a shootout. The sheriff did get shot. Now that's something that happens in all the accounts that I've read. Not sure how the discussion arose that led to the shooting, but the shooting did happen, and that's all the reason that the white community needed to just go out and start killing black people. And that's what they did. After this account of what the sheriff gave, it was open season on black people. The community, the white community out there, all ran home, got their guns, and started killing black people by the dozens. There was accounts of like 30 Negroes all killed. Negroes, that's what they call them. Like 30 black people killed at a time, several beatings, several different stories about something about black people going out to get wood and for a fireplace and never returned. And the police did nothing about it. They encouraged it. Then arrests were made. About 35 to 55 union organizers were arrested that were organizing the sharecroppers. However, they were not all convicted because the International Labor Defense, the communists, the same organization that was defending the Scottsboro Boys, who brought that case to international attention and had the entire world seeing what was going to happen to the Scottsboro Boys, which was made into a labor issue because in the US, black people weren't looked at as less than human beings, but in the world, they looked at black people in the US as working class citizens. They had their eyes on the Scottsboro Boys case that was brought to them by the International Labor Defense. So they also came to the aid of the sharecroppers in Alabama. So again, 35 to 55 black organizers were arrested, and they were to be convicted and hung. However, Camp Hill, Alabama did not want the spotlight on them at the same time as the Scottsboro Boys case was going on. They didn't want that type of publicity. They didn't want the whole world looking at them. So the International Labor Defense was able to free all who were arrested except for 7 or 8 of those that were arrested. So many people looked at that as a victory, because we like to say, well, what have you done for black people? That's how we criticize different organizations, which is a good question. What have you done for us? So the International Labor Defense, the communist organization, came to the aid of the Scottsboro Boys case and eventually freed them. They kept them from getting hung immediately within 48 hours of their convictions. They saved these sharecroppers. However, it was not a victory to be celebrated because prior to these arrests, the white community was just slaughtering black people. they call it a race riot. However, black people weren't rioting. These were white people just giving an excuse, a really poor excuse, to just go out and slaughter black people. And that happens throughout history. Like, we're going to read the Marrow of Tradition by C.W. Chestnut, which was based on the Wilmington race riots. Whenever there's race riots in the U.S., the race riots in the U.S. are white people going out on random riots and killing black people. That's all the race riots, and we're going to cover some of the race riots that happen in the U.S. because these are militias, these are the Second Amendment carrying out their Second Amendment rights. These militias were formed to suppress black people and protect their properties, so-called. So that's what the Camp Hill shootings were. The black person that shot the sheriff, he was one of the leaders in the Camp Hill union organizers. His name was Ralph Gray. And he didn't die at that particular moment when they had the shootout. He made it to a cabin, I believe it may be a church or something, and there was another standoff with police where he was actually shot in the face, drug out, and kicked and shot and on public display and made an example of for other black people to see what happens when you stand up for yourself. So it would be good for you to do some research on the Camp Hill shootings. I actually read an article called The Sharecroppers Union in Alabama, author John Beecher. And if you just go on the internet and Google Camp Hill shootings 1930s, and there's articles that'll show up, and you can read different articles and accounts of the Camp Hill shootings. And to sum it up, it's black sharecroppers organized along with the communists to form a union to make their lives better. And the community of Alabama and Camp Hill wanted to suppress it, so they started a fight with the union workers and the party. And when the fight ensued, white people went out and started slaughtering black folks. Arrests were made. They intended to lynch every one of the union workers and organizers. That was their intent. However, they did not want the spotlight of the entire world looking at this case as they were with the Scottsboro Boys case. So when Langston Hughes is mentioning these two stories, these two events that happened, it's setting the tone of his story. And actually what happened in the Camp Hill shooting actually occurred in this story, father and son. And we're going to get into that when I do the video tomorrow about father and son. However, so remember, in the Camp Hill shootings, there was a confrontation with the authorities, a fight broke out, shots were fired, and then that was all that was needed to ignite the white community to go open season on black people. And they killed innocent black people who didn't have anything to do with organizing any black person that they could get their hands on. They even went into churches and burned down churches. They always want to attack churches. They burned down churches, burned down cabins, killed black women, black children and families, people who didn't have anything to do with the Camp Hill organization, but that's all that they needed. They don't care. As long as you had black skin, you were an enemy, and they wanted to kill you. And they did. And there were no repercussions. The cops let it occur. Therefore, when the International Labor Defense defended the black organizers who were acquitted of their whatever crime they were convicted of, it wasn't time for a big celebration because a slaughter had occurred, and there were no repercussions for that. Same way as year after year, we see all these black um, men and children and women getting shot down and murdered by police, and there's no consequences. Nothing happens. They're all set free to live their life as they will. So again, this is Black Literature, Black History, and tomorrow we're going to cover father and son related to the Camp Hill shootings, Scottsboro boys, and then we're going to discuss the ways of white folks as a whole, close that out, and then we're going to move to the Big C, which is the first autobiography of Langston Hughes. So this is Black Literature, Black History. Have a nice evening.